You are still holding something that has already ended. You may not even realize it. It does not announce itself. It simply sits there, in the chest, in the shoulders, in the quiet, underneath ordinary moments. A conversation that finished days ago but is still running in your head. A person who moved on but still takes up more space inside you than anyone who is actually present. A version of your life that did not arrive the way you planned and that you are still, without quite meaning to, waiting for. I know this feeling. I have written these words from inside it, not from the other side of it, not from some place of having figured it out. From the middle of it, slowly learning what it means to open my hands. This is not a character flaw. This is not weakness. This is what happens when no one ever taught you that holding on and caring are two completely different things. You learned that the people who let go were the ones who did not love enough. That loosening your grip meant giving up. That endurance was the proof of devotion. And so you held. You kept holding, long after the moment had passed, long after the shape of things had already changed, because releasing it felt like losing it all over again. The Buddha saw this pattern with extraordinary clarity. He did not call it weakness either. He called it the one thing that costs us everything, and he spent his entire life pointing toward the way through, not through force, not through discipline, through understanding. Stay until teaching number 5, because what you hear there may finally give you permission to stop being your own most relentless guard. Now, breathe, and let these words find you. Teaching 1. You are not the storm, you are what watches it. There is a belief that most people carry so quietly they have never once questioned it. The belief that they are their pain, that the anxiety running through them right now, that is who they are, that the grief sitting in their chest, that is who they are, that the fear, the anger, the loop of difficult thoughts that arrives uninvited and stays far longer than it is welcome, that this is simply the truth of what they have become. It is not, and the Buddha was very precise about this. He said that the mind, in its natural state, is luminous. That word luminous meant something specific to him. Bright, clear, shining of itself. Not because life has been kind to it, not because circumstances have cooperated, but as a quality that belongs to awareness itself, the same way that clarity belongs to clean water, not earned, not achieved, simply what it is when nothing is disturbing it. He said that anger is a visitor, that fear is a visitor, that grief, restlessness, worry, these are all visitors. They arrive at the mind, they move in, sometimes quietly, sometimes with considerable force. They stay for a time, and then they leave. But they are not the mind itself. They are weather moving through a sky that remains underneath all of it, fundamentally clear. The sky does not become the cloud, the mind does not become the anger. What they are, and what passes through them, are two completely different things. Sit with that for a moment. Think of every difficult emotion you have felt in the past year. The despair that arrived in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. The sudden rush of grief over something you thought you had already made peace with. The anxiety that woke you at 3 in the morning with nothing specific to point to. Just a general sense that something was wrong. All of those moved through you, and something in you watched them. Something observed every single one of those experiences, and is here, right now, watching these words arrive. That something is not the emotion. It was present before the emotion came. It will be present after the emotion leaves. It has been present through every difficult season of your entire life, and not one of those seasons has changed what it fundamentally is. there is a story of a young monk who traveled for many days to reach a monastery in the northern mountains. He had heard about the teacher who lived there, a man who, people said, was untouched by difficulty. Criticism did not move him. Praise did not inflate him. Even physical pain seemed to pass through him without leaving the residue it leaves in most people. The young monk wanted to know how. When he arrived and asked to be shown the path to inner peace, he expected detailed instruction. Instead, the teacher pointed through the window at the mountain across the valley and said simply, "Watch it during the next storm. Do not meditate. Do not practice any technique. Just watch." The storm arrived the next morning. The monk watched. Lightning struck the mountain again and again. Rain fell without obstruction. Wind moved across the entire face of the stone without anything blocking the contact. And the mountain did not brace, did not resist, did not lean into the storm or away from it. It simply received everything and remained exactly what it was before the first cloud gathered. Nothing that passed through it stayed. Nothing that struck it altered what it fundamentally was. The storm passed through. The mountain remained. When it was over, the teacher asked, "What did you see?" The monk said, "The mountain did not try to stop the lightning. It did not try to redirect the rain. It let the storm be completely what it was and stayed completely what it was at the same time. When the storm left, nothing about the mountain had changed." The teacher nodded. "You came wanting to become unshakable, but the mountain is not unshakable because it mastered some technique. It is unshakable because it has never been confused about what it is. And in you, underneath the anxiety, underneath the exhaustion, underneath everything that today asked of you, there is something that works exactly the same way. Your fear is real. Your grief is real. Whatever is unresolved in you right now is real. But none of those things are what you are. They are weather. They will move. What watches them will still be here when the sky clears. It always has been. Right now, there are thoughts moving through you. You did not schedule them. You are not producing them deliberately. Something in you is simply watching them arrive and pass the same, something that has observed every difficult day you have ever lived through, every fear that arrived uninvited, every night that would not end. It was never broken by any of it. Not once. That is not a small thing. That is the most important thing. You are not the storm that moves through you. You are the stillness that was there before it arrived and will remain long after it passes. Teaching 2. The peace you borrow is not yours to keep. Here is something worth asking honestly. When was the last time you felt genuinely at peace? Not the absence of problems, but real, settled, quiet peace. The kind where your chest is not tight. Your mind is not running its audit of everything that could go wrong. And for a few moments, you are simply here, in your life, without resistance. Most people can remember a time like that. A season, a morning, a particular stretch of days when things were quiet and something in them was quiet too. And then it ended. And when it ended, something felt like it had been taken, like a state of grace that had visited and then departed without explanation. And in the absence of it, there was a subtle background question. What did I do wrong? Why can I not get back to that? Here is the answer the Buddha gave, and it is both harder and more freeing than the question deserves. The peace was real, but it was borrowed. Borrowed from the silence, from the favorable conditions, from the temporary absence of the difficult people and difficult situations. And borrowed peace, by its nature, must eventually be returned. The Buddha taught on a quality he called equanimity, a steadiness that does not depend on conditions, that exists not because circumstances are favorable, but as something underneath circumstances entirely. A quality of mind that circumstances can test, but cannot create and cannot remove. He was very specific about the distinction. If your peace exists only when the morning is quiet and the house is ordered and nothing outside your control is interfering, then the silence owns your peace, not you. There was a monk named Jishan who spent 3 years building something genuinely beautiful. He rose before the others. He sat for long hours. He tended a contemplative life, the way a careful person tends a garden, with patience, with attention, with deep respect for what was growing. And it worked. He was not performing calm. He had found it. Then a metal worker moved in next door. The hammering began before dawn. It continued through the morning, through the afternoon, and well into the evening. It was not malicious. The man was simply conducting his trade. He had no particular reason to accommodate the monastery 6 meters from his anvil. He was just working. Within a week, Jishan's 3 years had come apart. He could not settle into his morning practice because he was bracing for the sound to begin. When it began, he could not release his resistance. When it occasionally stopped, he could not trust the silence because he knew it was temporary. He began to resent a man he had never spoken to, with a creativity that surprised him. He went to his teacher and presented what he believed was a straightforward problem. The noise was destroying the conditions for genuine practice. Something had to be done. His teacher listened to all of it: the specific sounds, the timing, the accumulated resentment, the collapsed sittings. He listened with the patience of someone who has heard many versions of this particular difficulty across many decades, and recognizes in each one the same underlying question, wearing different clothes. Then he asked, "What do you think he is here to teach you?" Jishan stared. Tanaka was not here to teach anything. He was here to make metal goods and sell them. His teacher continued quietly. "You have spent 3 years learning to find peace when the conditions are ideal, when the morning is silent, when nothing outside your control interferes with the interior work. This is a real accomplishment, and I do not diminish it. But it is not the accomplishment you came here for. The peace that exists only in silence is not yet free. It is dependent on silence, which means silence owns it. Not you." Jishan sat with this in a silence that felt different from the silence he had been defending. "Your neighbor," his teacher said, "has arrived at precisely the right moment to show you where your practice ends. Any person can find stillness when everything cooperates. The question your practice has been building toward, without your knowing it was building toward anything, is whether you can find it when nothing cooperates at all." Jishan returned to his cushion that evening with something new. Not a hope that the hammering would stop, a genuine curiosity about what he might find if he stopped fighting it. He allowed the sound into his field of attention alongside everything else: the temperature of the air, the feel of the cushion, the rhythm of his own breath. One sound among many, present, real, not requiring a verdict. Something shifted. The sound had not changed. His relationship to it had. Think of the conditions you quietly require before you allow yourself to feel settled. The situation that needs to resolve first. The person who needs to respond. The circumstances that need to align. What would it genuinely mean, if your steadiness did not wait for any of those things? Not because the difficult things stop mattering, but because your center no longer moves with them. The stillness you are looking for does not live in the quiet. It lives underneath the noise, and it has been waiting for you to find it there. Teaching 3. 1 arrow is enough. Something happened. Maybe today. Maybe last week. Maybe it was years ago, and it still arrives without warning, as fresh as the day it occurred. And it hurt. Genuinely, legitimately, completely hurt. That part was not your fault. That part was not in your control. The pain of the first moment that was real. But there is something the Buddha saw with extraordinary clarity, something he described so precisely that it has remained unchanged for 25 centuries, because nothing about it has become less true. He called it the 2 arrows. The first arrow arrives from outside, a harsh word from someone whose opinion matters to you, a loss you did not see coming, a rejection that found a place in you that was already tender, a disappointment that landed exactly where you were least able to absorb it. This arrow lands. It hurts. There is no way around this. It is simply part of being a person, moving through a world full of other people who are carrying their own unresolved pain, and sometimes, in carrying it, cause yours. The first arrow is not optional. The second arrow is different. The second arrow is what the untrained mind does in response. The replaying of the moment, again and again, each time feeling the original impact as though it is happening right now. The internal argument conducted with someone who is not in the room, the things you should have said, the things you wish you had not said, the things you are going to say if this ever comes up again. The search through your own history for evidence either that the other person was wrong about you or that they were terrifyingly right. The shame that follows the anger. The exhaustion that follows the shame. The first arrow caused pain. The second arrow causes suffering. And the second arrow always, in every case, without exception, is self-inflicted. There was a young monk named Joshua who was walking his morning rounds through a village when he overheard 2 women beside a well speaking with complete confidence about someone they had clearly never met. "He is lazy," one of them said. "Sleeps past the other monks. No real dedication." Every word was wrong. Joshua rose before dawn, earlier than anyone else in the community. He sat longer, worked harder in the gardens, studied later into the evenings. He had given up a comfortable life to pursue this path with complete sincerity. Not one thing those women said had any contact with reality. And yet by the time he completed his rounds and returned to the monastery, he had been shooting himself with their arrows for 2 solid hours. He found his teacher, a man named Yunmen, trimming a small pine tree in the garden. Yunmen looked up once, read Joshua's face without comment, and gestured for him to sit. Joshua told the story. All of it. The specific words, the confident tone, the complete falseness of everything they said, the anger he could not release, the shame he could not justify. His voice tightened as he spoke. The wound was still fully open. Yunmen set down his trimming tool and asked a question that seemed to come from an entirely different conversation. "When you practice archery and your arrow misses the target, what do you do?" Joshua blinked. "I check my aim and try again. And if another archer shoots at the same target and also misses, does their miss affect your next shot? No. Their arrow has nothing to do with mine." Yunmen nodded slowly. Those women drew a target in the air and shot their arrows at it. Their target was a person they invented, a lazy monk, a young man without commitment. This person does not exist. Their arrows flew through empty air and fell to the ground. They never reached you. He paused and looked directly at Joshua. "But you were watching, and you caught those arrows mid-flight. You picked them up, loaded them into your own bow, and you have been shooting yourself with them all morning. The women caused you no harm. You have been doing that entirely yourself. Joshua sat with this for a long time. Something in his chest that had been clenched began, very slowly, to release its grip. This is not a teaching about emotional suppression. The Buddha was clear about that. He did not say the first arrow does not hurt. He said, a trained mind feels the first arrow and does not add the second. The pain is real, and it is acknowledged. And then, the mind does not build a structure of suffering on top of a moment that has already passed. Most of what people carry is not the first arrow. The first arrow lands, and its moment is over quickly. What stays, what sits in the chest for days, what turns in the mind at 2 in the morning, what arrives unbidden in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, is almost entirely second arrows. Suffering that is happening right now, in this present moment, about something that ended hours or years ago. Think of something you are still carrying. Ask honestly, when did that moment actually end? The person who said the difficult thing has moved through many other moments since then. They may not be thinking of it at all. The only place it is still happening is inside you, in the returning to it, in the picking it back up, in the firing again. You do not have to resolve it today. You do not have to arrive at forgiveness or understanding or any particular feeling. The teaching simply asks you to notice the distinction. The first arrow was real, and it landed. Everything since then has been a choice, even when it did not feel like one. One arrow is enough. You do not have to keep reaching for the second. Teaching 4. What you run from grows larger in the dark. There is something most of us have been moving around, not a dramatic thing necessarily, not something that would make sense explained out loud to another person. Just a quiet corner of our own experience that we keep just outside honest attention. We feel its edges. We are aware of its general shape. We know approximately where it lives. But we do not look at it directly, and we tell ourselves, when we notice this, that we are simply not ready. That when the time is right, we will face it. The time has been right for longer than you think. The Buddha named this pattern with precision. He called it aversion, the reflexive pulling away from whatever is uncomfortable or frightening, the instinct to create distance between ourselves and whatever we would rather not feel. And he taught something that feels counterintuitive the first time you encounter it. This pulling away is itself the primary source of suffering that we create, not the difficult thing we are avoiding, the avoiding. Because what we run from does not shrink in the running. It grows. It takes up more space than it would if we simply turned and looked. It begins to shape our choices, our relationships, the way we move through rooms and conversations, all while we tell ourselves we have simply chosen not to deal with it yet. There was a monk named Pema who had been practicing in a remote monastery for several months. He was sincere and hard-working, present in every communal practice, committed to every shared obligation. In the presence of others, he felt grounded, his mind settled easily. But when he attempted to practice alone, particularly in silence, particularly after dark, something arrived that he could neither name nor manage, a formless dread that filled every corner of whatever space he occupied. A sense of something waiting in the quiet. Every monk in the community was expected to complete one full night of solitary practice in a small cave carved into the cliff face. Complete darkness, complete silence, no contact with the community until morning. For 3 months, Pema found reasons, kitchen duties that could not wait, a developing discomfort that required staying near the main building, offering to take shifts that belonged to others. The careful, practiced evasions of someone who cannot yet admit, even to himself, what he is actually afraid of. His teacher observed all of this without comment for some time. He had learned that confronting avoidance directly rarely helped. What helped was something quieter, removing the belief that the avoided thing was as dangerous as the avoiding mind insisted it was. One morning he called Pema in, poured tea with the unhurried movements of a man who has nowhere more important to be, and asked one question: when you imagine being alone in the cave, what do you believe you will find there? Pema sat with this honestly for a moment. I do not think I will find anything specific, he said slowly. It is more that I am afraid of what I might find in myself, something I have been moving around for a long time, something about who I am when there is no one else in the room and nothing left to distract me from it. His teacher nodded, as though this were the most reasonable thing he had heard all week. Good, he said. Then tonight you will go, but you will not go alone. Pema felt relief move through him before he understood what was being said. You will go with your fear, his teacher continued. Instead of trying to leave it at the entrance, invite it inside. Greet it the way you would greet a visitor who has traveled a very long distance to find you, with acknowledgement, with something close to gratitude, and with the simple offer of a place to sit, and then remain there together. Fear arrives because it believes it is protecting you, he continued. It learned this role a long time ago. In circumstances where the protection was genuinely needed, it has been carrying out this work faithfully ever since long past the moment when the original danger passed. It does not need to be overcome. It needs to be told, clearly and gently, that tonight you are safe. That night, Pema sat in the cave as the darkness pressed in from every direction. Within minutes, the familiar response arrived. The tightening in the chest, the shallowing of the breath, the mind moving quickly toward the door. And instead of fighting it, he spoke to it quietly. I know you are here. I am not asking you to leave. I am asking you to sit with me. Something shifted, not completely, not all at once, but enough to notice. The fear did not disappear. Its quality changed from a wall that blocked passage to something more like a presence that could simply be shared. And as the hours passed, Pema began to sense what lay underneath it, not by pushing through, but because the fear, having been acknowledged without argument, gradually loosened its grip enough for him to feel what it had been covering. A deep, old ache, a loneliness that had been waiting quietly for exactly this kind of attention. And underneath the loneliness, something unexpected, a warmth, a quiet steadiness that had been there the entire time, beneath the fear and the avoidance and the years of careful not looking, patient, undiminished, waiting without impatience for him to become still enough to notice it. He left the cave at dawn, having found not the threat he feared, but the door that had been standing open all along. You do not have to force anything open today. This teaching does not ask that. It simply asks you to consider, what have you been moving around? What corner of your own experience have you been circling without entering? You do not even need to go in today. Just stop moving away. Stand near it. That alone is more than most people allow themselves. Named things lose most of their power immediately. Seen things become smaller than the shadows they cast. The thing you have been most afraid to find in the silence is not waiting to destroy you. It has been waiting very patiently to be seen. Teaching 5, the one I promised you. The guard you stationed against yourself. Here is what I want you to consider. The most relentless critic in your life, the voice that reviews your mistakes with forensic precision, that finds the flaw in every good thing, that tells you that you have not yet earned the right to feel settled, that reminds you of everything you should have done differently, that greets your moments of peace with a quiet list of reasons they are not yet deserved, That voice was not put there by your enemies. It was put there by you, to protect you. And it has been doing its job faithfully, without a single day off, for longer than you can probably remember. The Buddha began his teaching on loving kindness, what he called metta, not by directing warmth outward toward others. He began it with the self. He was very specific about this. Before the practitioner extends goodwill to loved ones, to strangers, to difficult people, to all beings, without exception, they must first genuinely wish their own well-being, not as a selfish act, as a foundation without which everything else is performance. He understood something precise about how the mind works. Warmth extended from a place of self-contempt is not warmth, it is a very convincing imitation of warmth. It exhausts the person extending it. It can be felt by the people receiving it, and it does nothing to address the original wound, which is simply this: somewhere along the way, you were placed outside the circle of those who deserve gentleness, and you accepted that placement, and you have been enforcing it ever since. Most people find it significantly easier to extend kindness outward than to turn it inward. Toward a friend, in difficulty, no hesitation. Toward a stranger who is clearly struggling, easy, natural, genuine. Even toward someone difficult, in the abstract, manageable. But toward yourself, right now, without conditions, without first requiring some improvement or resolution or evidence of deserving, that is another thing entirely. And the teaching asks you to meet it first, before moving anywhere else. There is a reason the Buddha gave the loving kindness teaching specifically to a group of monks who could not sleep. They had been sent to practice in a frightening forest and returned to him unable to settle. The fear was too physical, too consistent, too present in the body. They needed either permission to leave or something that would make staying possible. He did not give them a technique for suppressing fear. He did not tell them the forest was not frightening. He gave them a practice that would change the quality of mind they brought into the forest each night, so genuinely, so completely, that the forest itself would respond differently to them. Because a mind that has genuinely extended goodwill in all directions, including toward itself, starting there, building from that foundation outward, has nothing left to guard against. It does not need to scan for threats. It does not need to brace for what might arrive. It has already extended its care to whatever lives in the darkness. And so the guard, that faithful, exhausted, never off-duty guard, receives, finally, the information it has been waiting for. There is nothing out there that has not already received your care. You can stand down now. The body receives this information and does what it was always capable of doing. It opens. Right now, not at some future point when you have resolved something or improved something or earned something. Right now. Try this. Simply the genuine wish that you yourself be well, that you be free from the weight you have been carrying, that you be allowed to exist in this moment without the quiet hum of self-judgment running underneath everything. Not as a formula you repeat without feeling, as something you actually mean, even if meaning it takes effort, even if it feels strange, even if a voice immediately arrives to tell you that you have not yet earned it. You have been your own most faithful guard for a very long time. Tonight, you are allowed to stand down. Teaching 6. Stop carrying the river in a bucket. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you did today. It does not come from the meetings or the errands or the conversations or the physical demands of moving through a day. It comes from something much quieter and much more constant, the effort of insisting all day long that things should be other than what they are, that the conversation should have gone differently, that the person should have understood, that the plan the day simply did not cooperate with should have been honored. That life should have fit the shape you made for it. This insistence costs more energy than almost anything else a person can spend themselves on, and it produces almost nothing. More than 2,000 years ago, a Greek king sat beside a river with a Buddhist monk and asked a question that had been bothering him. If there is no fixed, permanent self, if what we call a person is actually a collection of constantly changing experiences without a stable center, then who is acting? Who is making the choices and taking the steps? And how can any of it go anywhere at all? The monk, whose name was Nagasena, did not answer immediately with philosophy. He pointed at the river and said, "Watch how it moves." The river has no fixed center making decisions. It has no map, no plan. It does not calculate the most efficient path or consult anything before choosing a direction. And yet, without exception, without failure, across any terrain, through any obstacle or season, it arrives. The water finds its way from the mountain to the sea with a consistency that no planned route could improve upon. When the river encounters a boulder, it does not stop to assess the situation. It does not waste its force pushing against what will not move. It finds the passage around, not because it is giving up, but because moving around is always more efficient than forcing through. The boulder remains exactly what it is. The river remains exactly what it is. Neither is diminished by the encounter. The river simply continues. When it enters a wide valley, it does not push itself to maintain the speed of the narrow gorge it just left. It spreads, it slows, it takes the shape of the available space with complete ease. When the valley narrows again, it gathers and quickens without complaint. It adjusts to every condition with the same fundamental nature intact throughout every single adjustment. It is always, unmistakably, a river. And it always, eventually, reaches the sea. Most of us relate to our own lives the way someone might try to carry a river in a bucket. We take a fixed container, a fixed idea of who we are, what we need, what must happen today, before today can be acceptable, and we try to pour the movement of life into it. The river does not fit. It never fits. And the suffering, Nagasena was saying, does not come from the boulder. It comes from the insistence that the boulder should not be there held long after the river has already moved past it. Think about your day. The conversation that was supposed to go one way and went another. The plan that the circumstances simply did not cooperate with, despite the preparation you put into it. The outcome that moved differently than you needed it to. Each of those is a boulder the river encountered. The boulder was real. Your frustration was real. The difficulty was real. And the river's job, your job, was never to make the boulder disappear, only to keep moving. You are still moving. The fact that you are here, having moved through everything today asked of you, having navigated every unexpected obstacle, having arrived at this moment that is the river reaching a quieter part of the valley, Vida, slower, still entirely itself, still entirely arriving. The river does not carry yesterday's boulders with it into tomorrow's current. It encounters them, moves around them, and continues toward where it was always going. You are allowed to do the same. Starting now. Starting here. Teaching 7. The treasury was always beneath your feet. Everything we have walked through tonight has been pointing toward one thing, not a technique you must practice with discipline, not a state you must achieve through effort, not something that will arrive when you have finally done enough, understood enough, released enough. A recognition, the simple, quiet, completely available recognition of something that has always been true and has never once required your help to remain so. The peace you have been looking for is not ahead of you. It has never been ahead of you. There is a teaching preserved in the Buddhist tradition, one of the most quietly radical claims in the history of human thought, that every person already possesses what they have been searching for, not as a potential, not as a possibility if they do the right things, as a present reality, complete and inexhaustible, sitting beneath every layer of confusion and difficulty and searching, undamaged by anything you have done, undamaged by anything that has been done to you. Simply there. The way the sky is simply there above whatever weather is passing through it. You are not working toward something you do not have. You are working toward recognizing something you have always had. There was a woman who spent her whole life in a small hut. She knew that floor the way you know the face of someone you have lived beside for decades. Every uneven board, every place where the cold came through in winter. She had swept it thousands of times. She had sat on it, eaten on it, wept on it. It was simply the ground beneath her present, completely familiar, utterly unremarkable. The years were hard, not catastrophically, not marked by dramatic suffering, just the steady, ordinary weight of a life lived close to its edges, never quite enough. Always the quiet strain of resources that fell slightly short of what each day required. A wandering monk stopped at her door one afternoon. He looked at her, he looked at the hut, and he saw something she had never once seen in all her years of living there. Beneath this floor, he said, is a treasury, not a small amount, something inexhaustible, enough for every need you have ever carried, enough for every need you will ever carry. It has been here your whole life. Dig where you have always stood. She did not entirely believe him. The claim was too large, too directly contrary to everything her experience had taught her about her own situation. But she dug because the cost of being wrong was only the effort of digging, and the cost of not trying was another year of the same insufficiency she already knew. What she found when the familiar ground opened beneath her feet did not arrive as joy, not immediately. It arrived as something closer to shock. The particular, disorienting shock of discovering that the story you have been living inside was wrong, not in some small detail, but in its most fundamental direction. She had not been poor in a poor hut. She had been rich, living in complete ignorance of what she already possessed. Now, sit with this question not as philosophy, but as something personal. Every moment of genuine ease you have ever known, when did it arrive? Think carefully. Was it when circumstances were perfect, when every difficult thing had been resolved, and every difficult person had finally understood? Was it when you had finally earned it through enough effort or enough growth? Or did it arrive in the spaces between, in the moments when, for no particular reason, something in you released its grip, and what was underneath became briefly available, a lightness, a quiet, a sense that you were exactly where you were supposed to be, without needing anything to be different? Those moments were not accidents. They were not rewards. They were not the result of finally deserving. They were the treasury making itself known through the floor, briefly visible in the moments when the searching stopped and the holding loosened, and the ground beneath you became, just for a moment, available. You have been standing on it your whole life. Every difficult year, every exhausting season, every night that would not end, you were standing on it. It was beneath you through all of it, undiminished, unchanged, patient in a way that has nothing to do with waiting, because it was never going anywhere. The monk did not give the woman anything she did not already have. He gave her the direction of her own attention. He pointed down instead of outward. He said, "Here. not somewhere else. Now, not when things improve. This ground, not some other ground. That is the only teaching tonight that matters, finally and completely. The peace you have been reaching for has not been hiding from you. It has not been somewhere you have not yet traveled, or something you have not yet understood, or a state you have not yet earned. It has been here beneath the difficulty, beneath the searching, beneath the exhaustion of holding on, waiting with extraordinary patience for you to simply stop digging outward and look down. You were never without it. You only forgot, for a while, to look down. Today you walked with 7 things that have been true for 25 centuries and are no less true in this moment. That you are not the storm, you are what watches it. That peace borrowed from silence is not yours to keep. That one arrow is enough, and you do not have to keep loading the second. That what you have been moving around grows larger in the avoiding and smaller the moment you turn and look. That you have stationed a guard against yourself who has been on duty long enough that the river does not carry its boulders forward, and neither do you have to. And that the treasury was always beneath your feet. None of these things require you to be different than you are right now. None of them ask you to have it figured out, or to have resolved what is unresolved, or to have let go of what you are still holding. They only ask you to consider for just this moment what it might feel like to loosen your grip. Just slightly. Not forever. Not with answers. Just enough to feel that the thing you are holding is not, in fact, holding you up, that you would not fall without it, that the ground beneath you is more solid than you knew. That is the moment. It is available right now, not tomorrow, not when the situation resolves or the person finally understands or the version of life you planned finally arrives. Now, in this breath. With one small, quiet act of release that says, I do not have to carry all of this forward. The moment you stop holding on, life opens again. It already has. You simply have not noticed yet. If something in these words found you today, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment and tell me which teaching sat with you. Which one found the place that needed finding? Your words may be exactly what someone else is searching for right now. And if you want to keep walking toward this kind of stillness, toward this kind of open-handed way of moving through the world, stay with us. There is more to walk through together. Go gently. The ground beneath you is more solid than you knew, and you exactly as you are, exactly where you are already standing on everything you need.